All right, I would like to call to order the Brevard County Charter Review Commission. If we would all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. It will be led today by Ms. Rogerson.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, if we could please call the roll.
Robin Fisher. Kendall Moore. Here. Marcia Newell. Mike Paradopoulos.
Here.
Marie Rogerson. Here. Lace Tredis. Here. Bob White. Here. Matt Nye.
Here.
Gabriel Jacobs Kirstein. Here. Tom Jenkins. Here. Cole Oliver.
Here.
Sue Schmidt. Here. Jordan Chandler.
Here.
Vic Lubker. Here. Dave Newman. We have a quorum.
All right, we have a quorum. Thank you so much. And if you have a cell phone, if you please put that on silent, that would be much appreciated, as we'll try to get through the business today as quickly as possible. We have the minutes that I believe were sent to everyone. Are there any concerns or corrections on the minutes necessary? All right, without objection, Mr. White and I second that, and it is adopted. All right, next we're going to, I'm sorry, Ms. Schmidt.
Can you hear me?
No. There you go.
Okay, sorry. Just before we start, I had two people contact me that aren't related, and I guess they're watching it on the website or whatever.
Thank you.
And they had a question. Now, I knew the answer, but it also told me that maybe we need to clarify that, or maybe you could clarify that for the public that is watching that isn't involved in all this. They wanted to know, when somebody makes a proposal and then they come back with an amendment, does the amendment get added to the proposal, or does the amendment take the place of the proposal? And I told them what I know, based on having been on boards. But I thought maybe just for clarification, I think it would be a good idea for the public.
Good question. The way that I've handled the proposals, and if people want to correct me or think there's a better way, please, I'm all ears, is just because a proposal starts a certain way doesn't mean it ends a certain way. I know we had some discussion about the recall measures, for example. It was initially introduced, and that can be amended in the process. Once it makes its way through 3 public meetings, we will vote on the final version of that. It could be a whole-scale change. It might be one word, one word change. But what we're trying to do, and I've tried to do in our meetings, and I hope it's been consistent, is the way that I would have handled it when I was in the legislature. Someone creates an idea, and the 15 of us will work together to either keep that proposal whole, or if we think we can improve it by adding or subtracting along the way with public input each step, we will vote on the final version of that initial proposal, is the way that I've seen it being done. If anyone wants to add to it, is that how you present?
What I also said to them was that the amendment takes place from the original proposal, unless they're only doing like a word or something like that. But when you have, some of these have 2 or 3 proposals or amendments, and so at that point, that amendment really takes place over the original proposal.
That's correct. And so whatever's added or subtracted, it could be multiple.
Yeah, and just in layman's terms, I think that, to me, was the best way to describe it for the public. So.
No, I think that's an excellent description. And as I used to grade papers, you know, you'd make the red marks and add and subtract it, and they turn in their final product, and we vote on that final product or give it a grade, I guess, yay or nay. But good question, and I hope everyone is clear on that, is that just because the proposal started one way doesn't mean it's going to be the end result. Right. And sometimes it becomes a 180, so you never know exactly what happens in this process. But I'm glad it's been very open, and I see there's a lot of emails coming in, especially on things like recall, on school board issues in general, let alone, I think, our proposal we're going to vote today on term limits. I think we're seeing a lot of emails on that, so it's been a positive step. Any other suggestions before we go to the staff and our attorney?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I don't know if this is the space and place to do this, but as everyone on this dais is aware, I submitted some substantial changes just about 2 hours ago, and so I would sort of request some leniency from this board and ask that we table proposal number 24 until our next meeting, which I think is July 21st.
Mr. Chairman, I'll do this, I hopefully help your proposal out. Why don't we discuss it today, knowing full well we're not going to have a vote,
Okay.
and we can have that open discussion, kind of like we did last time, I think, on the issue of vacancies. Hopefully, we'll have more clarity on that issue as well. So we'll take it up today,
Okay.
but we'll respect your wish, which is let's make sure we ponder on it, think about how we can improve it if necessary, and then wait for the vote at least till next time. Is that what you're asking?
Absolutely.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Other questions? All right, let's go to our staff. Jim, Melissa, do you have any additions, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. There's just two memos in the package was asked last meeting about the budget timeline for the county. So that's included. The budget gets approved by the Board of County Commissioners in September. They have two public hearings. Just there's a number of dates on here, but the other I'd just like to note for everybody is, and this year's the best example, on July 19th, the board sends the tentative millage, and that sends out what's known as the trim notice to all the public with the tax rates. So you can lower the rate from that point. You can't raise it from there. So as you're considering items that may affect the budget, you really want to have the information in before July as opposed to in before September. And then final is, and the chair mentioned it, there's your estimate from the Supervisor of Election for the cost of the two types of elections that are in the package. That's it, sir.
Great info. Any questions? All right, we'll move now to our attorney, Mr. Gugelman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got three items. One is you have a draft resolution for Section 7.4.1, and I would point out that Mr. Tredis, who was the original sponsor of this item, has presented some substitute ballot summary language. That's item one. Item two, I had been asked at the last meeting by Ms. Rogerson about the effective date of proposals, and I had indicated that I thought possibly it might be when the adopted resolution was filed with the Secretary of State's office, but I was not sure, and I'd have to check that. And the reason is because that's the requirement for ordinances. Your ballot questions and your proposals are being scheduled for adoption by resolution. So the answer to the question is that the effective date is when it's adopted, unless you provide otherwise. So if it's adopted in November, the canvassing board certifies the results that it's passed. It's effective at that particular point. I would suggest, and even though that is clearly the situation, that it probably is a wise idea to include in your draft resolutions an effective date, that it becomes effective upon adoption of by the voters. And obviously, if there's a proposal that the Charter Review Commission feels should have a later effective date, that can be provided in the resolution as well. Then item C, 3C, is on Proposal 18. Mr. Lupker had asked if it's okay to include, and that's a recall resolution, if it's okay to include school board. And the answer to that is this is probably one of the first summaries that I wrote for you all. I think it is a very close question under Florida law, and there's no case law to guide us whether or not the recall statute as it exists right now was intended by the legislature to basically consume the entire strata of recall. And there's also an argument too that when you talk about the school board, that maybe that's something that isn't appropriate to include in the charter, and that goes back to a 1971 rather dated Attorney General opinion. Do I believe that you can include school board in there? I think you probably can if you choose to. But it's just a very close question, that's all. And that completes my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Gould. Let's go one point by point. We'll get into the ballot summary in a minute. Any questions on proposal number 10 or number 18 that has been described by Mr. Google? All right. Let me, before we get into this resolution and ballot summary question, again, I'll open it up to all of us. How do you want to handle how we vote on these measures? Obviously, our legal counsel has come up with one determination. Mr. Tredis has handed us another potential piece of ballot language. Do you want to handle these all together? Do we want to handle them as they come? Anybody have a preference on that? I just want to make sure I do the will of the members.
Together makes sense. It seems to make sense, and I see some nods as well in agreement. But if we just get done with what we're going to vote on and pass, and then come back to it and say, all right, we're going to hit these 2 or 3, whatever it's going to be, ballot language issues.
Very good. Other considerations on that?
Mr. Chairman, to make it easier for everybody, since we're going to handle them all, I guess, at a later date altogether, the question regarding the ballot summary language is the only one that you all have passed, interestingly, unanimously so far, but the resolution needs to be acted on. If you would like, for next time, I'll bring it back with Mr. Tredis's ballot language, since it's his proposal, and with some very clear effective date language, as Mrs. Roberson had asked.
Any questions on that? Everyone okay with that? Okay, we'll do that, and obviously today we perhaps will have more work for you as well with whatever might pass or not pass today.
Right.
And kind of go from there. Okay, so we will not handle any of the ballot summary issues today, but we know that those will be forthcoming, and you have at least an outline for what might be the 3-attorney proposal that you can study for our next meeting. All right, any other questions for our staff, whether it be legal or otherwise? All right, let's move ahead to our agenda for today on the proposals. I believe we're up to number 17. Is that where we're at on the term limits? Proposal 8? I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry. And I think Mr. Burns, who proposed this, is not here. I think Mr. Chandler was kind enough to let me know about that. So why don't we temporarily pass that one and then move over to number 10, I guess. It would be on section on the supermajority public hearing. Is that where we're at as far as number 10 then? Okay. All right, number 10 is the proposal that we've been discussing for a while now. Was that yours, Mr. Nye? Or who was that in the end? Or is it,
That one's mine.
I'm sorry, Ms. Rogerson. Oh, yeah, that's right. I'm sorry. I'm thinking about someone else. Okay, sorry. Mr. Rogerson, I remember you asked the question last time about the effective date and so
Yeah.
forth. So you're recognized to, again, introduce number 10 on supermajority votes.
Perfect. I think we are all clear on what this does. As far as the response from our attorney, to me, just my personal opinion, I'm not going to live or die by this, but it seems simpler to me to put effective date language in this one proposal so that going forward, any charter amendments that pass by ballot don't have to have that added language every single time. But again, it's it's not something it's not a hill I'm willing to die on. So if there are questions about that or thoughts, I'm open to it.
All right, any questions on Mr. Rogerson's good proposal? Mr. Trez for a question.
I don't have a question.
Okay.
What I'd like to do is make a motion. And, if you look at all the parts of the county charter, not a single one of them has an effective date in them. And I've looked at charters from all over the state. I don't see any effective dates in any provision, any charter. And I think the reason is why is because by law it's effective when it's adopted by the voters and the canvassing board certifies the election. So I really think that to be consistent with the charter in every other charter, our charter and every other charter in the state. It's not needed. It's definitely, I think, confusing, the language that's in there, because I've already explained a couple of times why I think it's confusing, but I just think it is. And I think if you read it, you'd agree. But what I would move is that the words in the proposal after the word measure be deleted. Those words would be, "It shall be effective as an amendment to or revision of the charter on the first Tuesday after the first Monday in January following the election, or on such other date as may be specified in the amendment or revision." I move that those words be deleted.
Okay, before we take that up, I did want to get more take on the overall issue, but before we discuss, or let's discuss this issue first then. I know that Mr. Fisher kind of raised a question about timing in our last meeting. Mr. Jenkins, you've been through these proposals before as far as budgeting, et cetera, with your experience. Could you illuminate to the rest of us who don't have that everyday experience on the county commission why or why not you might think this is a good or bad idea?
I think that it does go into effect as was described, and so I don't think you need that in there. That's more of an ordinance as opposed to a charter.
Ms.
Yeah.
Schmidt, do you have an opinion on that, or?
I agree with
Okay,
that.
okay.
Having,
Yeah, can I ask a follow-up question to those who do have that experience
Yeah.
on the county
Mr.
commission?
Rosen, go ahead for a question.
When these ballot measures pass, some of them do have things that could affect budgets, could affect a lot of things like that. Are there benefits to having a date that is preset, that's farther out from immediately, like the county has to act on it?
Having run into this on both watching it on the county level and dealing with it on the city level in numerous different cities that I've worked with, I find that the best thing is to actually set the effective date in whatever the enacting document is, and usually it's upon it going into effect, upon it being approved by the voters. However, there are certain instances, I think, where you will have some proposals that you may not want to have an effective date until a later time. So it really is, the short answer to my question is it's based on the facts of the situation.
Mr. Rosen, do you have any follow-up? It's your proposal. Mr. Tredis.
I would comment that, regarding the budget, this proposal, the first time it could ever have any effect would be, I think, 2 years later, 2 years from November of this year, because that's the first time it could appear on a ballot. So whatever, those like hypothetical, they just don't apply, those budget concerns. It couldn't even possibly become voted on by 60% until at least 2 years from November of this year. So I just think those concerns are not relevant.
Okay.
Just for clarity, Blaze, what word are you proposing to start with the strike-through, just so I know what I'm reading?
On the word after measure, "It shall be effective as an amendment." So it would just say, it would read this: "Passage of proposed amendment shall require approval by a vote of at least 60% of the voters voting on the measure," period.
All right, further questions? Okay, so the proposals on the docket, does everyone approve of the suggestion made by Mr. Tredis? Okay, without objection, we'll show that change being made. That we're now on the proposal as amended. Is there any debate upon the proposal as amended today? All right, we've had our 3 public meetings. Go ahead for debate.
Okay, I just think it's a good proposal. I've voted for these increases in percentage every time it's been in the state constitution on the ballot.
would you please speak into the mic?
I don't think you're speaking to Mike. Might want to try it better.
Oh, I've voted for these increase in percentages when it's been on the ballot for the state constitution, and I just think it's a good idea for. So that's my only comment.
Thank you. Others in debate? Before Ms. Roderson closes on her, I couldn't agree more. I'm so glad you made it consistent with what we're doing here, and I think to change, for our equivalent of a local constitution, you should have that higher threshold. So thank you very much for bringing this forward. And with that, you're recognized to close.
please vote yes.
Okay. And with that, Melissa, if you'd please call the roll on proposal number 10 by Ms. Roderson.
Kendall Moore,
Yes.
Marcia Newell, Marie Rogerson,
Yes.
Blaze Tredis.
Yes.
Bob White,
Yes.
Matt Nye,
Yes.
Gabriel Jacobs Kirstein,
Yes.
Tom Jenkins,
Yes.
Cole Oliver,
Yes.
Sue Schmidt,
Yes?
Jordan Chandler,
Yes.
Vic Lubker,
Yes.
Dave Newman,
Yes.
Mike Herodopoulos,
Yes. And by, you now, was that 12-0?
13.
13-0, 13-0, fantastic. With that, that will be one of the measures. Well done, Ms. Roderson. Okay, we are moving forward to number 17, dealing with term limits for county commissioners. This is the third public hearing thus far. We have a few appearance cards before us, and with that, Ms. Katie Delaney is here first. Nick is, Tom Balutis is next.
Thank you. Last meeting when I was here, I was mistaken. I thought that this was the old proposal about term limits for county commissioners, but I'm for this proposal. One shot of 8 years, that's all we need. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Nick, I think he's here. Yes, very good. Welcome back. You're recognized.
Hey, thank you so much. Thank you for getting me up here so early today. This never happened before. Mark Twain once said, diapers and politicians need to be changed often for the same reason. That is the thrust of this proposal. Barack Obama served 2 terms as president. He can't run for president again. George W. Bush, 2 terms. You can't vote for George W. Bush again. That's because both of them were term limited. But here in Brevard County, we have a loophole where if you have been term limited, you can actually come back and run for the county commission again. And most people that I speak with who voted for the original referendum 20 years ago and who support term limits today don't think that's really fair. They think that cuts against the spirit and the purpose of term limits, because what happens is you have so many different advantages of incumbency. Incumbents have name recognition, they have connections to special interests and PAC money, they get free media coverage, and that doesn't disappear or dissipate after an incumbent leaves office. That is retained. And so I think the purpose of the term limits we have is to allow for a diverse array of new, young, enterprising citizens to step up and serve in public service. And we want to get that incumbent advantage out of the way so those people have a fighting chance so that they can run in competitive elections. So that's all this would do. It's a very simple proposal. It's very popular, nonpartisan. You saw that 82% of people in our county are for term limits. So I would just encourage you to vote yes, and if you have any final questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Are there any questions? Thanks so much.
Thank you, sir.
All right, are there any comments before we vote? Mr. White, for
I just wish
your
we could
debate.
do the same thing in Tallahassee and eliminate the word consecutive as well. I think it's a great proposal, and thanks very much, Nick, for bringing it forward.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I do have one question, and that is where I can see that this could cause some confusion. The amendment would limit to 2 consecutive or to 2 terms, rather whether consecutive or not. What happens if somebody is appointed to fill a vacancy near the end of a term, say with 7 or 8 months remaining in the term? Is that included in one of the 2 terms?
Well, only reference point I can give you is what we have in the legislature. I fully support this measure, and what we did in the legislature. I think turnover is a fantastic thing. The way that we handle the legislature is that if you're elected in a special election, your clock does not start. It's not until your first official general election is what we've done in the legislature. So, for example, Marco Rubio, when he was in the Florida House of Representatives, he was elected in a special election, and his clock didn't start, so to speak, until he was elected in the general election in the year 2000. That's how we handle it in Tallahassee. If other people want to, I don't know if that'd be a county commission decision or it's something we can kick around here. Mr. Tredis.
I think adding the word full would solve the problem, 2
Yep.
full terms.
Yep.
So I would move that the word full be added after the word two at the end of this proposal.
Any comments on that?
Yeah,
Mr.
I
White
got a
for a
quick
comment.
question. So that means that if somebody filled out got elected in a special election with 3 years left on a term, that means that they could then run for 2 more terms in addition to that? So they could literally end up serving for 11 years as opposed to 8?
Well, would that also mean if somebody resigned partway through, they could then run again?
Well, again, I could just give you from my experience in the legislature. I went through that, and I chose not to run again. I guess it depends on the individual. But if our goal is to thwart 2 full 4-year terms, at what point do you kind of cut it off? So, again, I'd like to be consistent as we are in the legislature, but again, I'm open to suggestions. Mr. Chairman? Yes.
I do think and a good example is right now you have 4 commissioners, you had a resignation. And if the governor would have appointed someone to fill so many months of that term, because it's under a year, at that point, then they decide to run, I think that needs to be addressed in here somehow, if you're going to do that. Because otherwise, then you're eliminating someone that might run.
Alternatively, instead of adding the word full, would we be able to add the term 2 elected terms? Because then it's contingent on them being elected. And if they're elected twice, then that kind of solves that issue.
Well, the problem there is, again, you might have a person just there for 1 year, and then they only get to serve 5 years as opposed to what they would have gotten 8 years. I think for simplicity, if we just say if you're elected in a special, it's not going to be counted against you. I think Mr. White's point is well taken. It could be even a 3-year term, but that's the reality is that at least the voters would be aware this person, male or female, could serve up to almost 4 years but still have those two full terms available to them. Because our goal is to limit terms, full terms, and I think that would be the easiest way to do it. And I'd like to stay, just like we did with our previous proposal on the supermajority, I'd like to stay consistent with the legislature. But if you all want to put a demarcation line of 2 years or whatever, again, I'm open to suggestions. Mr. Jenkins? Oh, no.
Can we get input from the author?
Sure.
See what he thinks?
I don't have any specific legal input on this question, but I would note that the debate that you're having about the partial term, that affects whether someone has the ability to run again, whether the terms are consecutive or whether they're lifetimes. Because if you were appointed to a county commission seat with a couple years remaining, then there's going to be a legal question of, in the existing law, this is before we make any changes, there's going to be a legal question of, can you then run for 2 more consecutive terms after that? So I think we might be kind of losing the point here where whether you have consecutive or lifetime terms, that question still exists. And some charters, I think, have language addressing the partial term. Others, I've seen them just defer to, what the case law says in different counties and different cities. But I don't think we should let that debate get in the way of whether the term limit could be lifetime or consecutive, because it's not really relevant. That's a problem you have regardless of whether the term limit is lifetime or consecutive.
Of course.
Nick, can I ask you this question based on your argument? For example, the President Obama, President Bush, 2 elected terms. Let's say one of them took over as vice president 2 years in for some reason. They would be able to run 2 more times, correct? So you're looking at this, I'm just trying to get an idea where you're coming from. You're saying 2 elected full terms. Because I think the chair is kind of onto something here in the effect that if someone's appointed, you really can't penalize them for that.
Like I said, there's different schemes depending on the jurisdiction of how to address an appointed term, but that's going to be a fly in the ointment regardless of whether it's consecutive or lifetime. I would ask our attorney here whether the 22nd Amendment allows someone to ascend from vice president to president after they've already termed out as president. I don't think it does, but I'm not a lawyer.
Well, they could run though.
They can serve as vice president, but I don't think they can become president again after serving 2 full terms, per the language of the 22nd Amendment.
Okay, so that's 2 elected terms.
Quick question. Would adding the word full allow people to then abuse the system and, like I said, conveniently resign and then years later?
I do oppose including full for that specific reason. I mean, I've seen incidences of one state legislator at least, who took like a mysterious 140-day gap from being in the legislature, then was reappointed by his colleagues, and he was claiming, oh, I can serve till 2026 or 2028. I just restarted my clock. I would not support including full for that reason. I think you could game the system that way. Any further questions?
Would it alleviate some of the concerns that have been expressed by our colleagues if it's elected to 2 full terms? So in the event that someone gets appointed for a short window, say 90 days, they can still serve out, or 3 years if it's a special election, they could still serve 2 more full terms. And to the concerns on the early resignation, those people would have already been elected to a full 4-year term. So, and that would quash that kind of gamesmanship that's being discussed.
If I may address that, yeah, I think that's a sensible point. There was a case in Palm Beach Gardens where a councilman was attempting to game the system by resigning early, and because the language in the Palm Beach Gardens charter mandated its consecutive elections rather than consecutive terms, he was not able to do that. So I think that's a great point.
I would support such an amendment as that to the proposal.
Well, again, too, I'm pretty sure it's unanimous. So all we're really debating right now is the ballot language, right? So we have some time on this. Let's, again, just like we've done with other issues, why don't we kind of ponder this, get your opinion throughout? I think we all understand our stated goal, and we want to make sure people aren't gaming the system. I think we truly believe in it, and I'm glad to see this proposal is coming forward. So why don't we table the vote?
Mr. Googleman has a...
Sorry, Mr. Cook.
Just to add more confusion.
Thanks.
Section 2 we're talking about amending Section 2.4 of the Charter. Section 2.5 of the Charter has the same language about serving 2 consecutive terms. So the sentence is, no person may qualify as a candidate or appear on the ballot for re-election to the office of County Commissioner if by the end of the current term of office the person will have served as a county commissioner for 2 consecutive terms. So whatever amendment that you all come up with, I think we're also going to have to include in this proposal, for clarification's sake, amending Section 2.5.
Okay.
Very good.
I'd be happy to come back next time with some revisions, but thank you for your support.
Okay, other people want to, Mr. Burns, you want to make a comment on that? Come on up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry, I'm a little bit late.
That's all right.
I have some knowledge in this particular issue. I've written about this in the past, and this is coming into effect for the Palm Bay City Council. So when I was researching the issue for special elections, in Florida statute, when it comes to qualifying, I can't remember the statute number off the top of my head, but for qualification purposes, you cannot qualify for a office that if by the end of that term for the office that you're running, your total time in service would exceed the term limits of that time. So if you were appointed, so say for example someone was appointed to Lober's position now, if they were to run for election, win again, and then run again, that second term they would exceed 4 years by 3 months. So they would not be able to qualify for that second term to run for that office. So, and I can't remember the statute. It is in the statute. I could probably pull it up quickly, but the problem comes under qualification.
Well, thank you for that information. The only thing I would add to that is I think state law is a little different because you had a situation, I'll just use the Marco Rubio example. He was elected in a special election, I believe, in December of 1999 and served 8+ years. And I'll have to look at the exact wording for the Florida Constitution, but I hear loud and clear. I think that helps us kind of work on this language. And as you have suggestions, feel free to send it in the staff, and we'll take it under advisement. Sure. Thank you. So we will Why don't we just hold off on the vote on this? I mean, it doesn't matter. We know we're going to vote and think through how we want to get the proposal done. And then with that in mind, let's also be thinking about how we want to write the ballot language. Again, we've got time to get this done right, and I want to make sure that the spirit of what we're trying to do is met. We don't want to see people game the system. I think you're going to have to look at both qualifying, and you're going to have to look at also the idea of election, as was brought up earlier, as we move forward. So we'll table number 17 up for a final vote, make sure we kind of get this right and meet the spirit of the goal and not lose out on this. And only thing I would ask is what I brought up before, which is just try to be consistent with what they do in the legislature and make sure that language is in sync. I think this will, because we want to get the best possible candidates, whether it be because they think about it one way, if you're a person who wants to serve on the county commission, and you know that if you run in a special election, your time will be limited, I don't think that's fair. You're almost giving an advantage to people who wait. And we all know that being an incumbent is a big deal. So if you don't run in the special election, the odds of you getting elected in a regular election against an incumbent is greatly diminished. So just to keep that under advisement. So we will, again, just like we do with number 8, we will postpone a vote on that and temporarily pass what we call it in the legislature and move forward to number 18 by Mr. Lupker, dealing with recall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Paul, based on what you said a few minutes ago, I'm going to add this language or suggest this language and then open it up for discussion, and then I'll wrap with my final thoughts. But on the second sentence, after the word county officer, the words would be included to include school board members named in section 1.4. That's where I'm at on this. And here's the rationale. For me, I think, and I believe deeply, that our representatives should be elected by the people and ultimately accountable to the people. Recall is an accountability mechanism. To take that away for just one group of individuals, I don't care if you're sitting on the Water Conservation District. If you do something that's malfeasance, you should be subject to the recall of the voters. So that's where I'm at on this going forward. And I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Question?
I have a quick question. Vic, it makes a little bit more sense to me to add it after that section. It says, any elected county officer named in section blah, blah, blah of this charter, and to include school board members makes a little more sense to me.
Okay, so, and I thought about that, Maureen, that's a great point. So were you thinking after the word charter?
Yeah.
Okay. I
Just
actually
reason.
thought the same thing, and I was going back and forth on that last night where to insert it, so I'm fine with that.
Okay.
All right, others, and Mr. Trettis.
I would point out that what you're talking about is my proposal, number 19. That's exactly my proposal. So I don't know. Your proposal now corrects a typographical error. And what you just said is my proposal, because my proposal corrects that same typographical error and then adds school board members. So what you're talking about is my proposal.
Well, technically, he's number 17, or he's number 18, and you're 19, so he's ahead of you online. But based on Ms. Schmidt's question earlier, but you guys can fight over authorship, however you guys want to do it. You can be called co-authors. Ms. Schmidt, go ahead. Yeah.
Blaze, if this passes,
I would like to address that. At the last meeting, I did ask Mr. Treides if he would amend what he had proposed to include Florida law and this section in Florida law when he included school board members and county commissioners and cities, and he has done that. And so his is even more specific. I think, Vic, I don't have a problem with yours, but he was asked at the last meeting, and I think, and he has done that, so.
Does yours, Vic, represent Florida law as well?
Yes, yes, it does. Here's where I'm at. I have no pride of authorship issue on this, okay? It's just getting this over the finish line, however we do it.
Sure. Well, you and Blaze can paper, scissors, rock on the side if you want. But it sounds like you're willing to give this over to Mr. Treides?
Absolutely,
Okay.
as long as the language I have is county officers to include the sheriff and everybody else, I'm on board. I don't care if it's 18 or 19. I don't care if it's Jones versus Murphy.
Okay.
Go for it.
All right, yeah, Mr. Jenkins for a question.
Mr. Grubel, am I on?
You are.
I asked a question a few meetings back. I think it was the state constitution was changed, something was changed where the sheriff, the property appraiser, the tax collector, and the supervisor of elections were, even in charter counties, were designated as constitutional officers.
Yeah.
So does that make the earlier provision in the charter in conflict with what the state is now considering? Because I don't know how you can be both a county officer and a constitutional officer. Perhaps you can address that.
Yeah, honestly, I don't think that change in the Constitution, I believe, was enacted in 2018. I can look at that further, but I don't think that in this particular case I really don't think it's going to make a difference. But certainly between, if you move forward with this today, we'll need to prepare a final resolution transmitting it for the ballot, and which will come back to you, and I can look at it between that time span if you want.
The other question I had, and again, I'm not for, again, by just the issue of the school board. The last I had heard, there was concern that whether or not the charter should be regulating school officers.
And that's
have we
correct.
Resolve that conflict, or is that something for the 3-attorney panel to consider if they get?
Well, this originally came up in a legal opinion that I submitted to you back at the beginning of the Charter Review Commission. There is an Attorney General opinion that's rather dated. It's 1971, and basically what it suggests is in so many words that county charters shouldn't be regulating the school board. Now, whether that would apply to the recall issue is still an open question. The Charter Review Commission had suggested and actually approved writing to the Attorney General on this issue, and then the proposal got killed off, so we did not send that letter out. So we don't know. But the short answer to your question is there's no case law in it. There's a very dated Florida Attorney General opinion from 1971 that would give you some reason to question doing this.
Ms. Schmidt, you have a question?
I believe at the last meeting, we also voted on the last section of 8.1 to keep that in the charter.
Yep.
And that was a 13-to-1 vote.
Yep.
To not remove, so that would affect that too.
Mr. Chair, from a procedural perspective, could I just right now request to table this and just move on to the next one? And if I so deemed, I could just remove it altogether next meeting?
You can, yeah, that's the beauty of the system.
Let's do that.
We have time, and
do
if we
that.
have an issue with now Mr. Tredis's proposal, we can always circle back with you and do that. That's a great, I think that's a
the way to
good
go.
suggestion, if you don't mind.
Yep.
Okay. We'll table also number 18. Those people had appearance cards. I think you're speaking on 19 anyway, so you're good. Okay, let's move to number 19, the identical proposal. With the good work of a lot of people on this committee. Mr. Tredis, you're recognized in number 19.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's actually not identical. My proposal corrects the clerical error made in the charter, and then it goes on to add school board members as constitutional officers who may be recalled pursuant to, and I replaced general law as suggested with section 100.361, which is the general law being alluded to in 5.2. It's the section which provides for the recall of county commissioners and city council. And I think that's a good change because for voters who want to research this, they'd be able to go right to the section and read what the law is rather than trying to figure out what general law is, which they'd probably never get to it if they tried to look for it. So I think was a good change. I would just like to point out some things. our attorney originally in a memo said that it was a close call. And he cited, I think, a 1971 Attorney General opinion. I pointed out that that Attorney General opinion did not address recall of school board members.
Correct.
It addressed matters such as can the county take over the school board's hiring and these internal operations, and the answer was no. So I don't believe that that Attorney General was applicable. Attorney General opinion was applicable to what is before us. But I think even more importantly is if you study the letter to the Attorney General for an Attorney General opinion from Mr. Gugelman that was never sent, it points out that from the Brevard County Charter Review Commission in 1994, a request for a legal opinion from the Secretary of State Division of Elections was requested, in which the Charter Review Commission, or whatever enacting charter it was, asked if the charter could call or provide for the recall of the county constitutional officers. And the answer was yes, it can, okay? And additionally, in the materials, there is a opinion of the Florida Supreme Court in which the Florida Supreme Court held that school board members are county officials, and they explained why. So I believe that I think the law is clear that school board members are county officials pursuant to the decision of the Florida Supreme Court, and they are constitutional officers, are specifically listed as constitutional officers in Article 9 of the Florida Constitution. So I think it's on solid legal ground that school board members may be recalled, as are all the other county constitutional officers. And if this proposal were to pass, I think the benefit of having the attorney review panel is we'll get the opinion of 3 attorneys on that as well. Substantively, I would argue that yes, school board members should be subject to recall like other county constitutional officers. And if they were to remain excluded from recall as they are now, what that would mean is that in Brevard County, the sheriff, tax collector, property appraiser, supervisor of elections, all the county constitutional officers, they could be removed from office for breaking the law, malfeasance. But a school board member who breaks the law could not be removed for breaking the law, for malfeasance. So I submit that they should be treated like all the other constitutional officers, be subject to the same criteria and standards. And that would conclude my remarks. Thank you.
Well, thank you. We have our own 3-judge panel here. Mr. Jacobs Kirstein or Mr. Oliver. Mr. Moore, any opinion on that? Mr. Oliver?
I'll make a quick comment, not as specifically on the, as Blaze was talking about, but on the proposal in general. I think it's a good proposal. I like it. I think Blaze went through the changes that, you know, those who dissented the first time requested. A little just draftsmanship, a little hesitant to reference a specific Florida statute number, just in case it changes in the future to be a different statute number, but it's kind of getting wrapped around the axle. You know, but if we would just said per Florida statutes, I think that would cover it, but
Yeah,
I'm
good
fine
point.
with it either way.
Mr. Moore, any?
You know, we've talked about this one before, Mr. Chairman, and my concern about the prior proposal for Mr. Tredis was that it set a different standard, and he's gone in and changed the standard to what this is. I agree with him that there shouldn't be particular elected bodies outside the scope of the recall. Do have a little concern with what Mr. Goulman raised as to whether this is the appropriate place to do it. But even those from the audience who had objected to it originally were okay with placing it here and school board members being on even ground if the state statutory construct was used. And so in that light, Mr. Chairman, I wouldn't be able to support it as well.
Jacobs.
As it stands, it's there. You know, I would support it as well. I think that it started out in a fashion that just it needed some tweaking and some work, but it is consistent with what this commission and with what the public, most importantly, is looking for and what they want. As far as the legality issue, I mean, sometimes you just have to go for it. And I think this is a situation where it's not, absolutely clear cut on either side. It is close. It's questionable in that sense, but Mr. Tredis makes some very good points, and I think we just we go for it. We have the catch-all of the, well, not really a catch-all, but we have the backstop of the 3-attorney panel to get another opinion from them as well, and we'll go from there.
Mr. Goldman?
Just a clerical issue here. Going back to Mr. Oliver's comment about the fact that the statute could be changed or maybe even replaced by another statute. There is a rule of statutory interpretation that the courts have approved, which if you reference a specific statute, it is seen as being that statute as it is in effect at the time that whatever your amendment is adopted. So what I would suggest to clarify that, if you want to continue by referencing the statute, is to include after where it says section 100.361 Florida statutes as amended or superseded from time to time. And I think that would clarify
I'd like to
that.
also add that by referencing a specific statute, it may preclude other statutes that are out there that in the future that may reference recall, specifically maybe recalls directed to school board members in the event the legality ever gets questioned. So, but again, I'm okay with the proposal so long as our attorney signs off on it.
Okay. Mr. Tredis?
When I wrote this, I intentionally left out the words "or subsequently renumbered Florida statute." I've seen that in other charters where a statute number is written and they cite the statute and they say in any subsequently renumbered statute, I think, to take care of that contingency. I didn't do it in this case, or my proposal, because I'm looking at this statute and it's been in place since like 71 or something, a long time, and it's just been sitting there for decades, and I just don't have any reason to think it'd be renumbered, so that's why I didn't include it. But I'd be glad to add that language. I just don't know exactly what that language is.
I would really recommend to you as amended or superseded from time to time. And the reason is if something is renumbered, that only changes the numbering. It doesn't necessarily change the wording.
Okay,
And that's what you're trying to stay current with, is whatever the current wording is for recall.
What I would do then is move to amend my proposal to have those words as amended or superseded
From
time to time after every citation, after Florida statutes is said in these, in the proposal. After section 100.361 Florida statutes is said.
Okay. Well, let me ask this question, because what really matters is what voters will see. What will they see, Paul? Mr. Goldman?
What they will see is they won't see this unless they actually ask to look at or go to look at the actual wording. This is not the ballot language.
Okay. Yeah,
This
and that,
is-
to that point,
this
when we
is-
do the ballot language, we won't have all the numbers in Florida, so. Okay.
Correct.
So that, I think, then, anyone object to Mr. Tredis's, like, I agree with that. I just want to make sure the voter doesn't start seeing all these numbers and get confused.
Get confused.
Okay, perfect, okay. So without objection, we'll show that, I'm sorry, Mr. Lipker?
Yeah, I just want to make one final comment, just because of the way we both came at this, is that from my perspective, I'm going to reach out to the local legislative delegation, because I think the state should take this up in the next session, and that we should have statewide uniformity on this issue. So I'm just going to throw that out there as well.
All right, I'll be happy to help you. That's a good idea. All right, so we are, without objection, we're going to show that change made by Mr. Tredis so that we're all in agreement. And we've had the proposal read 3 different times publicly. We have a couple of appearance cards. Katie Delaney, do you want to make any comments? Welcome back.
Thank you. Firstly, I just wanted to say thank you. This has been a extremely emotional sometimes explosive topic, and I just really appreciate all of you listening to the public and hearing us all out on this. The only question that I have about the proposal, and I don't know if this is the appropriate time to talk about this, is as per the recall process laws, for school board, the people collecting the signatures have to be in the district that you're recalling that school board member. I agree with the people signing to recall should be in that district, but I was wondering if there was a way we could change that the volunteers going to collect the signatures are within the county versus within the individual district.
Ms. Schmidt?
I don't think it matters where they live in the county.
It does.
That does if they're going out to collect.
Mm-hmm.
But it matters where the people that sign it live.
Yes, but they have to be witnessed. So the witness has to, as per the current laws, has to live in district. And so I didn't know if there was a way to make it so that the volunteers going to witness the signature could simply be a county resident versus that district's resident. I don't know if that makes any sense.
It's my understanding, and Paul, if you could, because it's state statute that regulates that, that would have to be part of,
Through the
again,
state, okay.
Yeah. It's not county that can oversee that, as I understand it. So that would be part of what I'm looking at, going to the state delegation and saying, let's get uniformity on this and how we do it.
Awesome. Okay, awesome.
Thank you.
You guys.
All right, next we have Carol. And you pronounce your last name again. I
Hello,
apologize.
yes. Carol Vyhonsky.
Okay, welcome back. Thank you.
Thank you. Listening to all of your comments over the past few minutes, I don't really have anything else to add other than to say, obviously, I support this proposal, and thank you again for listening to us for the last few months, and thank you for your votes.
Thank you very much. All right, there are no other appearance cards. The proposal has been amended. I think, are all aware of this. Again, Vic, thanks again for being very generous with this, and I think by you bringing that proposal forth earlier gave us some time to kind of catch our breath. I also want to thank Ms. Schmidt for sticking to her guns and helping us get a better proposal out of this so that people see that it's uniform, it's not just directed at one group. I think that's for the credibility's sake. So, and Mr. Trudis, thanks for being patient with us as we work ourselves through this process. Any other debate on this issue? All right, I'll debate. I'm really glad this has finally come to fruition. I appreciate those folks sticking with us from the beginning, and I think this is something that people, what better way to empower people than having that ultimate say, not only to elect, but to keep folks in office. Mr. Trudis, did you want to close on your proposal?
No, I'll waive closing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, with that, Melissa, if you please call the roll on proposal number 19.
Kendall Moore,
Yes.
Marie Rogerson,
Yes.
Blaze Trudis, Bob White,
Yes.
Matt Nye,
Yes.
Gabriel Jacobs Kirstein,
Yes.
Tom Jenkins, Cole Oliver,
Yes.
Sue Schmidt,
Yes.
Jordan Chandler,
Yes.
Vic Lubker,
Yes.
Dave Newman,
Yes.
and Mike Herodopoulos.
Yes, and by your vote, proposal number 19 will be placed in the ballot pending ballot language. Well done.
Nice.
All right, next we're going to move to number 20 by Gabriel Jacobs Kirstein. You are recognized.
Yes, thank you. So this is the third meeting on this issue. It's to amend 7.4.1 to add a subsection 3. Since the last meeting, I've made some revisions due to comments that were made by other commissioners. Number one, I'd like to say that, I took this on as kind of a project for the group, since this seemed to be an issue that was brought up by our attorney, Mr. Gugelman, and some concern was voiced on paving the way for a clear course of action in the event that this happens. Mr. Gugelman conferred with me on this and was very helpful in drafting the language and getting the intent to be clear. In addition, I added subsection A, which Mr. Moore had brought up as being, something that I thought was a good idea as well, and it seemed to have the support of the commission, where when the proposed amendment is sponsored by the Charter Review, so not when it's brought forth by the county commission or by petition, but when it's sponsored by us, the three-attorney panel will be selected by the Charter Review as well. So it alleviates that concern of maybe back channeling or not having that fiduciary duty to the commission. So it's completely open in that sense. I think it's pretty straightforward and self-explanatory. On subsection B, you're just, delineating or setting out what the course of action, what the procedure is if something is rejected by the three-person panel, and how it would come back to the Charter Review to cure it, because that's the ultimate goal here, right, is to pass things that are legal, but that are also, appropriate for the public to vote on. So for those reasons, I would ask everyone to support it, and, if you don't, you don't. No, I'm just kidding. But thank you very much.
Thank you. Other questions? Mr. Trettis.
I like A, that the Charter Review Commission would basically hire the three-attorney panel. But B, to me, Part B, when you look at the time frames that we're dealing with, it doesn't seem like it is really doable. For example, if this were to pass today, it's July 7th, it says that the review panel should have 30 days for their answer. Well, that's August 7th. And if their answer were no, it's inconsistent with state law or the Constitution, then August 7th, the ballot language is due to the Supervisor of Elections August 22nd. That's 2 weeks later. So, 2 weeks to try to correct it. And that brings up another point is, I don't know, personally I think proposals, it would be very difficult to try to change the language, massage the language to make them constitutional or not inconsistent with state law, because to me, I think most of these proposals would either be preempted by the state or not, in which case they're okay if they're not. But I don't know. It just seems like I don't know that could ever be, I don't think it's a good assumption to believe that everything can be cured, especially under these time frames. And the other thing I'd like to point out is that we've already passed a proposal where if the same situation takes place, it simply says it's returned to the county commission or the Charter Review Commission for action if it needs to be done, meaning it's just open, okay? So under that language, you could intentionally, try to get your vote done early in the process, like 2 months ago, in which case you'd still have plenty of time to try to cure it. So I just don't know what is gained from this now that the proposal that's been passed has been passed. I'm just not understanding, the benefit, except I do like 3A on hiring the attorneys. But that's just my, and the other, I guess, a final point is, I don't know, if this were to pass, I'm just wondering if, voters would look at this and say, well, I don't know really what this means. It's pretty technical. I'm going to vote no, and then vote the other proposal no, too, because it's really touching on the same section. So I don't know. I guess I'm not sold on it, to tell you the truth. That's all.
Okay. Just a couple things. Originally, it was 10 days, but after working with Mr. Gugelman, he said just based on his experience across the state, you want to be able to give them a reasonable amount of time. If we want to shorten it back to 10 or 15 days, I have no problem to give that extra week or two, or a couple of weeks rather. And then the last sentence in this section, notwithstanding section 7.4 of this charter, the term of the Charter Review Commission shall be extended for the sole purpose of further considering any charter amendment proposal rejected by the three-person panel, alleviates the issue of us not being in session anymore, so to speak. We would just have to address things quickly, so we could shorten the time or leave it as is If anybody has any questions in more detail as to what Mr. Gugelman was referring to, or whether he thinks it should stay at 30 days, feel free. The other aspect to comment on here is that it gives us an opportunity to cure a defect. It doesn't force us to try to cure that defect. In other words, if there's something that can just be tweaked, and that's why this really specifies, hey, you're going to give us a written report containing your conclusions for each proposal so that it's not vague. You can tell us, all right, these are the 2 things or 3 things that can be done to cure this, or it's incurable, or we decide that it's not even worth moving forward on. So it leaves that open and leaves some discretion to future, charter review commissions. And then as far as it being a little too technical, I want to be very clear on it. I don't want a whole lot of ambiguity, and the ballot language, I think, can take care of that. In other words, we can draft the ballot language in a way that it will make sense to the voters and is not as technical or legal that way. So, I was just acting off of what I thought the commission was looking for, and for those reasons, I think it sets out to do that. If you think it's contradictory, then you can vote no.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Jenkins.
I think that I have an issue with Section A. The county commissioners are elected by the voters of Brevard County. There's only one elected official sitting on this panel here today. So I don't think it's appropriate to negatively connotate the actions that the county commission may or may not be taking. I could support the Charter Review Commission recommending a 3-person panel to the county commission, but I think the county commission should have the final say on it. Blaise, in regards to your concern about timing, the solution to that is relatively simple. The Charter Review Commission just has to get their work done sooner, and then you can meet those timelines.
And as far as A is concerned, I have no problem changing that. If that's the will of the commission, if everybody else feels that way too. Again, I'm totally open to amending this to make it work for what we're going for here.
Mr. Knight?
Just a point of clarification, the charter review choosing the 3 attorneys, wasn't that because we were also trying to tap the budget here, so we weren't subject to the county, or no? Maybe I'm just misremembering.
I think Mr. Knight was raised by Mr. Tredis. He had some conflict concerns in the early days about whether or not, and I think that's where Mr. Jenkins was going with that whether or not the county's commission choice of it could impact the outcome of the 3-panel decision.
Right.
And so, I mean, that's not where Mr. Jacobs-Kirstein started, but I think based upon Mr. Tredis's request, I think it's made its way to that particular point.
Correct.
In terms of how we got there, where it even came from in the first place.
But I guess what I'm after is, as proposed right now,
yes,
would we as the Charter Review Commission be paying those attorneys?
I believe so, and that's what would the fiduciary duty, that's where that would come from, because we're actually paying them. There are clients, so to speak, for that purpose.
Got it. Thank you.
Mr. White.
Just out of curiosity,
Or
has the
vice
county
versa.
commissioner, has the county commission started the process of selecting the 3-attorney panel for this go-around?
I think it's done, right?
Is it done? Do we know who they are?
Just trying to get the contract finalized. Gray Robinson, I'm not good at this, guys. Nickerson, Nickers, they've been around, and Civ Forge was the 3rd firm.
Mr. Tredis.
Yeah, a point I didn't make is if you went through this process or rejected, you came back pursuant to this proposal and tried to reword it, I'm pretty sure that if you reworded it, it would again have to go back to the 3-attorney review panel for another review, which would be more time. I'm just pointing out the time element again. That's all.
Well, I think to Mr. Jenkins' point, I think we started, October, November, whenever it was. If this is a concern, which I think it is, I think for the next 6 years from now, by the way, there's term limits on that too, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, just making sure. The idea is maybe we start a little earlier with the expectation of finishing in, let's say, March or April, so that if we need to come back into session, based on this three-judge or lawyer panel, that we'll have the abilities. That's just food for thought for 6 years from now. Yeah, because we can't change it now, to Mr. Jenkins' point. And, I'm sorry, Mr. Bennett, of course.
You said all the contracts are not signed yet?
No, still finalizing. just
When
the
do
language.
you anticipate that?
The next couple weeks at tops, so.
Because I think, you know, if this board passes something, I think at that time,
Yeah,
it can move to that three-panel and
Yeah.
not all pile up at one time.
As
So
soon as we'll
hopefully
see-
that can
yeah,
be
yeah,
expedited.
Yeah, we've talked to the firms about the timelines, yes.
Thank you.
And I have one question for Mr. Gugelman. Do you think that 30-day time frame, if we want to be as safe as possible, could we make it 15 days even to save a couple of weeks there, or do you really think that that's not a good idea?
I'm sure that you probably can change it if you choose to. One thing I would point out to you with regard to the last sentence, it may well be, and this gets back, as the chairman noted, when the Charter Commission is appointed and when it conducts its reviews, but it may well be, if it's so close to the finalization of the ballot by the Supervisor of Elections, that that particular item might have to be carried over to the next general election ballot in 2 years.
Okay.
And that's why the language in there that talks about extending the term of the Charter Review Commission for that item.
Thank you for that clarification. And, you know, at this point, I would move to amend the 30 to 15 days, and that hopefully helps a little bit there without being unreasonable to the three-attorney panel.
Does anyone object to that, from 30 to 15? All right, make that so. All right, well, back on the proposal. Is there debate on the proposal as amended? All right, so there's no debate, so we can go to, I'm sorry, Mr. Jenkins.
Can I make a motion to amend?
Of course.
I move to amend that the Charter Review Commission submits a list of attorneys to their recommend attorneys to the county commission. The county commission has final say on them. To give you an example, the county is already negotiating with three attorneys, three legal firms, and they don't even know what your ballots are. They don't even know what the questions are yet. And yet they're picking three attorneys. So to us automatically associate there's some sort of inappropriateness, potential inappropriateness going on, I just don't think it's founded. I think the county commission should have the final say on the three attorneys, so I'll make that motion.
Sure, and I want to be very clear, there's no insinuation of inappropriateness. This was just to avoid in the future any appearance of impropriety or any possibility of it, okay? So this is not a situation to where we're inferring that we have some concern with this particular commission or going forward. So I just want to be clear on that. But I don't have a problem with your amendment either.
Anybody else have a problem with that amendment?
I would oppose that.
Okay.
Yeah, I would oppose it too.
Okay, well, let's talk about it. So those people who are for or against it, go ahead and speak up. Mr. Nye, you came in first.
Oh, I just think having the Charter Review Commission as the final say is consistent. Again, we've been talking about consistency. If the attorneys are going to represent the Charter Review Commission, I think we should have the final say.
Okay. Others? Mr. White?
Same argument as well, and I also like the what you were referring to, which was that it eliminates any appearance of impropriety or conflict or anything of the nature.
Okay. Mr. Jenkins?
What demonstrates to you that this panel has any more proprietariness than the county commission? I'm sorry. If it removes the county commission from interference, how does this panel supersede the county?
I don't know that it does necessarily, but this is the panel that heard all the testimony. Okay, this is the panel that worked through all of the entire process of putting all of these provisions together, all of these amendments to the charter together. It just seems to me that this is the appropriate panel to then make the selection as to who that three-member panel should be. And again, I mean, we started out this whole thing as, early on, there were questions as to whether or not the county commission would have undue influence over the three-attorney panel. That's an issue that was raised early on in the process. Not by me necessarily, but it was raised and it was considered at the time. And I just think that this, as it's currently written, it eliminates any any impropriety at all, or any chance of it, I just think it's great the way it's written. And I don't think it's a slap in the face of the county commission for this panel to be the panel that, that chooses them.
Again, just to follow up, I think the entire purpose of the Charter Review Commission is to be maybe not a check, but at least provide the citizens an input as to the way they want things to function. And so this seems like a logical extension to me. Again, if, as Bob just pointed out, if we're doing all of the work, and it sounds like we'll be footing the bill, that it makes sense that we would be the final say on that. So I just think it's completely consistent with the spirit in which this commission was created. And again, as we've moved through these meetings over the years, we, like I say, we keep turning up inconsistencies and we're fixing them as we go along. And I view this as just another step along that path. That this is a better way.
Mr. Nye, you're not footing the bill, the taxpayers are.
Fair enough. For either way, whether it's the county commission or the charter review.
All right, further in debate. Anyone else? Okay, so we're going to have a vote before the main vote on the amendment proposed or objection opposed by Mr. Jenkins. Mr. Jenkins, if you could just repeat your proposal so we can vote up or down on that, please?
I think the Charter Review Commission would submit a panel of recommended attorneys to the County Commission for the County Commissioner's final approval.
Okay, we'll have a voice vote on that. All those in favor of Mr. Jenkins' amendment say yay. Yay. All those opposed say nay. Nay. I believe the nays have it. So we're now on their proposal, not amended, but amended earlier. Is that right? Okay, good. With that, maybe I'll ask a question before I go into debate. Mr. Jenkins, you didn't win that vote per se. More importantly, just like we had the issue earlier where Mr. Tredis had a proposal on recall, we made adjustments. Does that prohibit you from voting on this? Are you, okay, just want to make sure. All right, anyone in debate? Okay, seeing no debate, why don't we go ahead and call the roll on Mr. Jacobs Kirstein's amendment, or proposal, excuse me.
Kendall Moore,
Yes.
Marie Rogerson,
Yes.
Blaze Tredis,
No.
Bob White,
Yes.
Matt Nye,
Yes.
Gabriel Jacobs Kirstein,
Yes.
Tom Jenkins,
Yes.
Cole Oliver,
Yes.
Sue Schmidt,
Yes.
Jordan Chandler,
Yes.
Vic Lubker,
Yes.
Dave Newman,
Yes.
Mike Herodopoulos.
Yes, and by a vote, the proposal passes. Well done. Thanks for your good work, and thanks for everyone's input. All right, next we're going to move to number 22 by Mr. Nye with revised citizen advisory process. We're in their third meeting, so there can be a vote on this if we choose to. Mr. Nye, you're recognized, please.
Thank you. I think this one, again, was self-explanatory. We put into place, 2 charter review commissions ago, a provision for citizens to ask the county commission. Basically, they could come before the commission, make proposals for improvements, and essentially ask the commission to vote those up or down. That process only takes place once per year, and based on some concern of some people that reached out to me and also people that attended here, I thought it would be nice to have that happen twice a year to give the citizens a little more opportunity to do that. So,
All right, we're on the proposal. Are there questions on the proposal? Mr. White.
Yeah, I just have a question of staff, really. What's the impact on staff whenever one of these, whenever we go through this process and there's a recommendation that's made? How much staff time it ends up being applied to, what are the expenses associated with reviewing these different proposals? And if we did it twice a year, would that unduly burden the staff? Or can you just kind of enlighten me on that?
The proposal, the process that I'm looking, I have some dates from one of the examples is, you release it in December for responses for the month. We receive the responses through the month. We start responding back in January. Then staff puts together a report for the board on each of the items, and you take it back to the board in March. It really depends on what the recommendation or what the citizen's putting in. You could have anywhere, you could have multiple departments, 2 or 3 departments, a number of attorneys. We could be sending them out, we've sent them out to cities and other constitutional officers because it was related to that. And then you could have 8 or 9 staff members working on it. So
it can be quite cumbersome.
It could be quite, yes. Mhm.
Ms. Schmidt?
Yeah, Mr. Leisenfeld maybe hasn't told you, I mean, it really is a huge, huge thing for the staff that goes on. And I know the county commission has addressed that before, and the answer to that was once a year. And one of the main reasons for that is at every single meeting the county commission has, they have 2 places on the agenda for public comment, and anyone can go before the county commission. In fact, someone here has done that, and express their thoughts about whatever they want to talk about. And they also can address an item on the agenda if they wish to do that. Right now, the way it works, the people are really, once a year, if they want to make proposals, they sure can. But it does take a lot of staff time, and I think that's what you were alluding to, but I'll say it. And I just wanted to put my 2 cents worth in, because if the public did not have the ability to comment to their commissioners or in public, or make proposals in public meetings during public comment, that might be another thing, but that's not the case.
Others? Ms. Lipker?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Originally, obviously, I was not in favor of this in last meeting. I was clear where I was at with you on this, Matt. I think when you get a frequent flyer sometimes, it wants to come in every month or every meeting, come up with a proposal, that burdens the heck out of staff. But I don't think twice a year is too much to ask to let citizens kind of make their input known. So I think you tighten it up to the right number, Matt, and I think twice a year is fine.
Just out of curiosity, how much use do we get out of the once a year? Like, how many of these tend to come forward?
The last 3 years, the immediate past year was 0. The year before that was 9, and the year before that was 55.
Oh, wow,
Yeah.
okay, fun.
Did any of those proposals go anywhere?
It depends on what the proposal, I believe, what it is you send it to the county commission to accept the recommendation with revisions, or reject it. So there are items that we do accept with modifications, talking about different kind of litter pickups, but there's been items like telling us to get together with other counties and buy the Florida East Coast and shut it down. Right. And so we recommend rejecting that item.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, it gets deep.
I'm sorry, who's asking? Yeah.
Mr. Leisenfeld, do you, on that 55 number, do you also have the breakdown of how many came from one person?
No, sir, I do not have that in front of me.
Is it fair to say that some of those had a significant number came from the same person?
I don't recall anybody.
I'm not trying to pin you down, Jim.
No,
I know how this works.
I don't recall anybody having more than a handful in that case.
Okay.
So just to follow up on that same question, whether the majority of them come from one person or not, you still have to spend time as staff addressing each concern that's been raised.
Yes, as staff, we still have to report it back to the county commissioners with a recommendation, and then the county commissioners have to vote on the consideration of the recommendation no later than 120 days.
I'm sorry.
I guess this would be a question for the staff and our attorney. Is there anything to prevent the council from or the commission now to offer a second time and not having to place it in the charter?
I can't answer for the attorney. It's in 2.910, the process, so.
Jim, I don't think there's anything that prohibits the board from setting a policy that allows them to do this 5 times a year if they wanted to.
Now I understand.
That
No, sir.
was
That
the
is
thrust
correct.
of my
That's
question.
correct, sir.
Let me ask this. I'm not coming from the staff era, but and it's not, but that's not my argument, it's the person who's not here, Mr. Fisher, he brought up the idea, if you can't get one commissioner to embrace your idea enough, the odds of you getting 3 or 4 votes out of 5 are pretty slim. I understand where Mr. Nye is coming from, because in other places, i.e. the school board, and others are not given the time of day. But I just wonder, is this something we, quote, put on the ballot, when it's something that can, as Mr. Oliver just asked, can be adjusted? And I know all the county commissioners, unless there's, they're pretty logical folks, and if there's any merit to an idea, just like we did in our multiple meetings, even ideas we didn't think were the greatest, we still gave them a hearing. I would like to think that if an idea had any kind of decent merit, that they would give them the time of day beyond that one meeting. I like the concept of the proposal, but the, quote, eat up ballot language in this might be a little bit far for me to cross, but again, I don't want to influence anyone else's vote, but I just a little concerned about, do we put this on the ballot, or can we make a recommendation to the commission? What do you think?
I've got a follow-up. Yeah, I've got a couple of rebuttals here from different things I've heard. Okay, so one, I personally, you know, maybe I'm crazy, whatever. I had specific, concrete issues for improvement for the county that would have saved millions of dollars, could not get the time of day from any of the commissioners at the time. So I'm obviously sympathetic to this particular item. It's not about coming and standing here for 3 minutes. It's about forcing the commissioners to vote up or down on an idea, okay, on a proposal. So, and I know other people that have also had the same issue where they cannot get an item agenda for whatever reason, and it may not be because a commissioner disagrees with the idea. So maybe you go to one commissioner and they say, yeah, I'm not for that. Then you go to another commissioner that is partial to the idea, but because of pushback he gets from staff, he doesn't want to agenda it, and so it goes, right? And so the whole purpose of this is to make it where it has to be addressed and voted on. In terms of the staff issue, Mr. Liesenfeld, are the requirements, like when somebody brings one of these forward, is staff doing any more work than when a commissioner puts something on the agenda? Like, essentially, aren't we saying we're just adding a citizen is bringing forth an item? So in a sense, yes, you have some more agenda items, but it's not like a citizen proposal is somehow, you know, significantly more work than, I mean, is that a fair statement? Or, I mean, I understand that there are some outliers, right, where, as you mentioned.
You're going to love my answer, but yeah, it depends on the item and what they're looking for.
So I guess that, you know, I just, that piece, you know, I understand, like you say, the frequent flyer thing. I would be curious to see the breakdown of the 55, because I hadn't heard that one. The other numbers seem much more in line. But those are my two big, you know, and again, right now, I mean, we've got it in place once a year. I think that's great. I just think twice a year would be better. And I just feel like some of the things, you know, these are, yes, it's work, but at the same time, had I been given the opportunity, if these items had been given a vote, you know, it would have, those cost savings would have been substantial. You know, it would have more than offset the minimal work staff would have had to do.
So just a question, Matt. Did you bring your items up in that once a year window?
I did not know this was prior, so this was actually, my issues happened. That's why when this came forward on the charter review, I was obviously supportive, right? I'm like, heck yeah.
Gotcha. Sure. Good point.
So one more question of staff. So if we go to twice a year, then we're talking about going through this process every 6 months. So as of right now, let's not deal with the 55. Okay, we had 55, we had 9, we had 0. What if we had 20, 25 of these? Is that more typical? And how long would it? I guess my question is, would you be done with the review of 20 or 25 of them in 6 months and then be ready to restart again, or would it sometimes take longer than 6 months to complete this review?
No, under the charter, we have 120
okay.
that the board has, but then you have a case of, because it takes us 3 months to work on everything, get it to the board, so now you're working on them 6 months a year instead of 3 months a year.
Mr. Luker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, I'm going to direct this to both Tom and Jim because of your staff expertise on this. The 55 number has got me kind of going the other direction now. That scares me, especially with the frequent flyers. Haven't dealt with them. Could we just do this as an AO and just kind of suggest to the commission, consider doing this or even making it more visible and just make it an administrative order?
A policy, a board policy.
I think that's the way to go then.
To be blunt, I don't think it'll happen. I mean, that's why it's being brought up here. Again, this is the purpose of the Charter Review Commission, is we dictate how the county is going to operate, or at least we put forth to the voters how we think the county should operate. So are you guys going to like pinky swear you put it in place? What's the recourse? You see what I'm saying? So that's all. I mean, this is the appropriate body. It's not the end of the world. Like I say, we've already got it in place once a year. I just thought twice a year would be better based on the feedback that I got from the public.
Mr. Chairman, I just have one final comment.
Sure.
For the record, I just wanted to be known that Mr. Nye and I don't always agree on everything.
Can we call the question?
Mr. Chairman, I do have one. I'm
Yeah.
very sympathetic to the staff's time and energy as well, and I think as I heard Mr. Leisenfeld describe it, it takes almost 6 months to get it done, so 2 times turns it into a perpetual process.
3 months times 2.
And that perpetual process is a concern. Mr. Nye and I were here previously. I did have sympathy when it was 0 and the opportunity didn't exist. Now the opportunity does exist. It exists annually to turn it into something that lasts 12 months out of the year, basically, to get it done, I think is a significant stretch for staff, and I wouldn't.
He said 3 times 2, 6 months out of the year, not.
Well, he's got 120 days to get it to the commission.
It would be 3 months times 2.
But you have 120 days to do what?
It's 120 days from the, what do you want to call it, the receipt of the recommendation that has to be brought to the board, and the board has to take action.
Okay, so 6 of the 12, I'll give you that. I still think it's quite a bit. Let the record reflect that Mr. White and I happen to agree on this when it does happen.
Okay. So I think we're done with the debate. So why don't we go ahead and call the roll on the proposal? Let me see. I'm sorry. There's a couple of appearance cards in this. Let me see if there's not on. I'm sorry, 24 there is. So we can go ahead and call the roll on that, Melissa. Thank you so much.
Kendall Moore,
No.
Marie Rogerson,
No.
Blaise Trettis,
Yes.
Bob White,
No.
Matt Nye,
Yes.
Gabriel Jacobs Kirstein, Tom Jenkins,
Yes, I mean, no. No.
Cole Oliver, Sue Schmidt,
No.
Jordan Chandler,
No.
Vic Lubker,
No.
Dave Newman,
No.
Mike Herodopoulos.
No. All right, by a vote, it does not pass. All right, we're going to move to number 24 by Mr. Chandler, and we've already talked about earlier today that we're going to table this for a vote next time potentially. But Mr. Chandler, you are recognized. We have a few appearance cards as well.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Once again, and as stated many times, this proposal, the purpose of this trust fund is provide a continuing non-lapsing fund for the Brevard County Commissioners to create and sustain affordable housing throughout Brevard County. My amendment to the proposal, which there were many, has identified a single viable funding source, which is the sale of county real surplus land, which is deemed appropriate for workforce and affordable housing. The dollars that are generated from the sale would then go into the trust fund, which then can be used to create more affordable housing units by incentivizing CHODOs or community housing development organizations and developers who wish to build more units. In essence, this creates a continuous fund and really establishes a circle of life. Now, I do believe that the Board of County Commissioners should still be able to allocate dollars and resources to this fund as established by ordinance, which is why that language is still included in the proposal. Really don't want to go through all of the data again that I went through last time, because I'm pretty sure that we're all aware of the severity of this issue, that we're faced with. Now, at the previous meeting, I did mention that, I would be having some meetings or a meeting coming up with a major corporation here in Brevard County. This particular organization has inquired really about what Brevard County is doing to address workforce housing. And I would say approximately 50% of that company's workforce are blue-collar workers. So In essence, they're making less than $25 an hour. And out of that conversation, it was discovered that over the past 6 months, this company has targeted over 600 new employees. And out of that 600-plus job offers that they extended, there were 347 declined offers. And their current employee relocation rate is pushing about 45%. And so really the question that was posed was why, but I think we all know it. It's because of the lack of affordable housing here in this county. And I would say really everywhere. And so if this is just one company, just imagine what the others are feeling, right? So they're asking what kind of investment can we make? What can we do to not only keep our people here, but what can we do to also attract new employees and taxpayers to the Space Coast? So now at our previous meeting, and I would really say at all of our hearings, I received many questions surrounding this proposal. And I would briefly like to answer some of the ones from the previous meeting. Number one, Ms. Schmidt asked me if I looked at what funding was approved by the County Commission back in May as a part of the federal ARPA dollars that were received. I went back and looked at this information, and no funding was specifically set aside in May for affordable housing. The Housing and Human Services Department, as well as the County Community Action Agency, have received dollars for emergency rental assistance, right? But that was over a year ago when the dollars first started, being dished out. Number two, Mr. Tredis had some very poignant questions about the county code language that was included in the original proposal, and that language, I would say, was stricken because I do agree with them. It was excessive. Number three, Mr. Luker had some questions and concerns about certain portions of the revenue sources as detailed in the original proposal. The funding sources that he asked about, which were asking about mandatory or voluntary payments. He asked if this was strictly relating to impact fees, and to a certain degree it was, but from a voluntary perspective, what I was really alluding to was inclusionary zoning for projects or developers that may have said, I don't necessarily want to have to set X amount of units aside for the creation of affordable housing, therefore I would rather pay in lieu of. And so, I've stricken that language from the proposal because I do believe, after also talking to Mr. Googleman, that it could potentially be controversial down the road. And so from a legal standpoint, I struck that from the proposal as well. The general fund language that was also stricken from my original proposal because Mr. Luker raised the question relative to if those dollars were not spent at the end of the fiscal year, could they not be able to be reverted back to the general fund? The intent of this proposal is to create a non-lapsing fund, so those dollars have to remain within the fund. But therefore, knowing really the budgetary constraints that we're under, right, I think that it was appropriate to strike that particular language from the original proposal. I honestly believe that I have addressed a vast majority, if not all, of the stated concerns that were raised previously. More especially, and I'll close with this, the question has been asked, what makes this different than what currently exists? And I stand by this, that this creates a permanent fund with a single identified funding source with the caveat that there can be others, and it clearly delineates that the fund cannot be swept unless the voters decide to shut it down by getting rid of this, from the charter. So, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for that explanation. Other questions? Ms. Luker.
First of all, thank you, Jordan, for the hard work. You put a lot in on this, kind of tighten this up a lot. Can I ask you a question or just clarify for me? Revenue sources C, that's the area I'm going to focus on, kind of like last time. The trust fund established under this section shall be funded as directed by the county commission and may be comprised of the following resources. What you're saying there is there's no ballot language related to taxes going up, correct? It's going to come out of the general fund at their discretion. It could be $1 or it could be $1 million. That's the hard decision they would have to make.
Correct. And that was the original, and that's why I really listed a litany of different funding sources, Mr. Luker. I didn't want this to be another tax upon the voters. And a lot of the counties that I've spoken to, and have had some additional conversations this past week. Some conversations are being thrown out about potentially, putting a half-cent sales tax on a referendum, right? So, obviously didn't want to do that here. I wanted us to look at what we currently have available to us, not imposing any additional undue burdens upon the taxpayers, but also keeping them in mind that they're the ones who are affected by the lack of affordable housing here in the county.
Correct, and I agree with you. Section 1 and 2 of Sections C. Funds from the sale of county surplus real property. Are you talking about excess property, not real estate?
Correct.
Okay.
What, I'm sorry, say not real estate?
Not real estate. You're talking about?
No, real surplus property. So
real
that's,
surplus, our excess property, that could be used for that. We're not talking about selling county land.
No, sir. No, sir.
Okay. And other sources established by ordinance, in other words, whatever the county commission at the time deemed as an additional source. That would be on them to come up with that.
Correct.
Okay, that addresses those for me. Thank you.
Other questions, Mr. White?
Yeah, can I just to follow up on that, can you give me an example of county surplus real property that's not real estate?
Yeah. Well, so they have, and I'm actually waiting for this to come back from the Housing and Human Services Department, but there are approximately about 200 properties that are currently listed on the real surplus property registry list. And so really waiting to identify what properties are appropriate, are deemed appropriate for affordable housing.
I think,
it is real property.
yeah.
Correct. Real surplus property.
But I think the distinction maybe, and I think this is probably a question for our staff, the county goes through a process with their real estate holdings and decides what is a surplus property list.
But we are talking about real estate.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay.
My apologies.
Yeah, okay, all right.
Mr. Tredice?
Yeah, I just have more questions. I don't know what county surplus real property is. I have no idea what that is. I mean, is it private property that people didn't pay their taxes? I thought that went up for bid. I just don't know what county surplus real property is. I'd like to know that. And I'd also like to know, whatever it is, how much of it is sold every year? How much money does it generate? And where does that money go once it is sold?
Correct. So there's currently some language in the Florida State statute. I think it's 125.379. And the reason why I wanted to leave that language open is because the county would then have to decide what is deemed appropriate. And to my understanding, Mr. Googleman, there is really no clear delineation of what appropriate means. And so then the county would have to look at the registry that they have. For example, there are some properties that are, out in Canaveral Groves and wetlands. And so then they would have to, in essence, look at those properties and then carve from that. The Housing and Human Services Department would then have to carve from that what properties are deemed appropriate for workforce and affordable housing.
Mr. Luker?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, maybe that a takeaway for you then is to kind of tighten that part up a little bit, maybe add some clarity to it for all of us, because I was thinking excess property like surplus typewriters and trucks. All right,
No.
All right, so maybe think about that, and then this is just a thought for you as you go forward with this. Mr. Fisher brought up, I think, a good idea at the last meeting, that potentially a lease back option, if you went with a PPP option, public-private proposal like that, the county could just lease that back. And I'm just saying that as you think about developing this a little bit. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Tredice?
The proposal says that this is funded by the funds from the sale of county surplus real property, not that housing is built on real property. So I get back to my question, how much funds yearly are obtained from the result of the sale of county surplus real property?
That number is to be undetermined at this particular point in time. As I stated, was waiting on that information back because of the fact there's 200 properties that currently exist out there, but it obviously has to go through an appraisal process and all that. So I don't have that number with me currently, but I was asking the county for the actual taxable value of that property at this particular point in time. So. And that's
Because-
some information I could bring back at the next meeting.
Yeah, because if it's, if it's $100,000 a year, then what's the point of doing this? I need to know the dollar amount, because this does have a this proposal, unlike your previous one, does have a dedicated source of funding. I just don't know how much that would be. And I think that's critical to know.
Okay.
Mr. Jenkins?
There are little lots around Canaveral Groves, Port St. John, I'm sure Palm Bay, other places. The developer left vacant. It could be part of their overall development permitting process, but they're sitting empty. However, when you look at surplus property that's owned by the Solid Waste Department or the Utilities Department, Parks Referendum, those kinds of things, they retain ownership of those properties, and those dollars have to go back to the entity that generated them, whether it be garbage, wastewater, whatever. But there are little sporadic lots in Port St. John, but they're not that many, and they're usually pretty small little pieces of property.
Mr. Schmidt?
Plus, I believe this would only affect the unincorporated area. It would not be all 16 cities at that point, which then poses another problem, because only the unincorporated area would be affected, which could increase the amount of money at that point. And I don't mean for extra lots, but the cost of the program itself.
And Mr. Chairman, I think to your point, and just like the team was able to do for us on that one time a year meeting, 0955, maybe they can get you with a number of how much in years past, quote, surplus lands generated for the county, just so we can get a ballpark for it. Because if our goal is to fund it to a degree, as Mr. Tredis has brought up, if it's just a small amount, maybe it's not the best funding source, but I think that maybe that staff can help us figure out for the committee members' proposal, just so we have a ballpark number and get a source to your goal. Other questions? Mr. Tredis?
There's actually a suggestion, what you just said to county staff, which is if it's true that sale of surplus property has to go back to Parks and Recreation or solid waste disposal, if that's in the ordinance or that's just the way it is and it's not available, then I don't believe that that should be part of the dollar amount, because that cannot fund this proposal. And I'm taking that as a fact that that's true.
Mr. Jenkins?
I certainly don't want to downplay the importance of the affordable housing issue in Brevard, because it is becoming a very critical issue. However, I'm not aware of any other fund sources that are in the charter. Historically, funding and budgets are done legislatively as opposed to charter, so I would just put that on the table. You know, I agree there's an issue, but I don't know the charter is the place to solve that issue.
Okay. We've got a few appearance cards, and I wish to go to proposal number 8. I think Mr. Burns has his proposal. We have Michelle Auclair, followed by Chris Stagman, I'm sorry, and Betsy Farmer. Welcome back. Great to see you.
Good afternoon. So I work for Volunteers of America, Florida. We are the largest homeless veterans program in the state of Florida. We house up to 80 homeless veterans at any given time in our place in Cocoa. So I wanted to go over a little data with you. We do serve outside of veterans, but I have, so over the last 5 years, we have decreased our veteran homelessness pretty significantly. But over the last 3 years, we have maintained 165 on our by name list, and these are ones that have been identified. Of those 165, as of today, 69 of them are considered long-term or chronically homeless. As of the last 90 days, we've only been able to house 23 homeless veterans because of the lack of affordable housing. Not all of them are 100% service connected, get $3,000 a month. They come out of the service, they have their own issues that they're dealing with, and then we're getting them back in the workforce. Well, if they're only making $15, $20 an hour, they can't afford a one-bedroom apartment for $1,000 a month. Even a room to rent now is $700 and $800 a month. So it's really kind of like a stretch. So the average length of a homeless veteran from when we identify them to when we house them is over 366 days. That's how long it's taking us to not only get them ready for housing, but then to find housing. I have some that I've been looking for over 6 months for just a one-bedroom place for them that they can afford. So that says a whole lot right there. On top of that, over the last 90 days, yes, we've housed 23, but we now have 28 new veterans that are coming into the system. So we are not getting ahead when it comes to moving people from homelessness to housing, and a lot of it has to do with the lack of affordable housing. And I'm not saying low income. I'm saying just regular workforce affordable housing. I have a single dad with 2 kids, 8-year veteran. We can't find him an apartment that he can afford on what he makes. It just makes it really difficult. So I'm here to advocate on that part. Volunteers of America has served over 1,500 veterans in the last year. And we still are struggling daily to find housing. We've gotten to the place that we're having to find housing and put 3 or 4 veterans in a housing, but guess what? If you have 3 or 4 veterans with PTSD or traumatic brain injuries or alcohol or mental health problems, that doesn't work. So I just want y'all to really consider this for the sake of our veterans.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thanks for making the time to visit with us. Thanks for your work, too. Chris Stagman. Hey, Chris, great to see you, man.
Good to see you. Good afternoon. Chris Stagman, South Brevard Sharing Center. I just want to start off by thanking this commission for even bringing this up. As Mr. Jenkins said, Mr. Chandler has put this proposal forward. It's tough. It's tough out there. I'll give you some statistics that we have in June at the Sharing Center. We received 410 calls for assistance in June, 27% increase from May, and it just keeps coming. And these aren't chronically homeless folks. These aren't poor and underprivileged folks. These are blue-collar, working families, working hard to make ends meet that need help, whether it's through our food pantry, whether it's for rental assistance, light bills, so on and so on. It's just going to keep coming. I get that the trust fund is new. It's something that, we're looking at. It's a work in progress, but it's important. And if you all can just take the time to really look at it and look at the numbers and try to figure something and put something forward to the commissioners so that this becomes a priority in our community. All of us on the not-for-profit level, there's angels out here. I mean, we're working hard, but we're getting hammered. I mean hammered. So the fact that you're even looking at it and taking the time, I applaud you for it. So thank you.
Mr. Stagman, what is a typical, like when you had 400 applications last month, what's a typical award you give to a family or an individual to try to kind of help them out in these times of trouble?
It just depends. I mean, we use the sliding scale like, most agencies do. Food is big. I mean, our pantry's pretty empty. I mean, we're going to be running food drives all fall because we get it in and it goes. A lot of rental assistance for utilities and rent. I mean, the cost of rent has gone up 20%. Food's gone up 10% in the last 12 months. So it's those types of little things where folks are just falling a little bit farther behind. And to us, it just doesn't seem like there's any end in sight.
Thank you very much for your service. Thanks, Chris. Good to see you. All right. Next, we have Betsy Farmer, followed by Robert Burns. Great to see you. Welcome back.
Good to see you too. Thank you very much. Thank you for this opportunity. And for the first time ever in almost 37 years, because Luke is 36 and a half, I am not here to advocate for necessarily just people with disabilities. Go figure, right? I am here to talk to you about the seniors. So I work now, I'm the Director of Community Outreach for the Housing Authority of Brevard County. And every single day, I get calls from folks that are looking for housing and can't afford the housing, right? But I'm getting calls, I bet you I get 1 to 2 a week from a senior who doesn't have a voucher and is calling me because they're homeless or they're about to be homeless. And I tell you what, this population is really getting my heart. Not that all the single moms and dads don't get my heart, but the seniors. We have seniors living in cars, okay? And unfortunately, we really haven't done a really good job of gathering all of the data on them. We try and send them to 211, but sometimes they don't want to call 211. But just some of the folks that I have talked to, like helping seniors of Brevard, in the last 4 months, they've gotten 109 phone calls from seniors that need help with housing. 22 of them were homeless. Some of them sleeping in their cars. Seniors. Oh, and where are their kids? I don't know. You tell me. Sometimes they just take off. One senior place has gotten over 200 calls. We, as the Housing Authority of Brevard County, are targeting our housing for elderly and disabled. So we have just recently finished the construction on Palm State University. That's going to be 60 units. But we only have 60 units. We had 257 people apply. So it doesn't seem like people talk very much about the seniors. And I'm here to say our seniors are in a crisis mode right now. And it's incredibly sad. I spoke with a guy yesterday, 69 years old. There's no more emergency housing money for him to live in a hotel. So he is going to be in his car until that money gets replenished. So we don't have enough shelters. But I'm so glad that we're talking about this. I do love the title, workforce housing. I really do, because that's incredibly important. But I also am here to advocate for the seniors, and we've got to do something about that, because it's just not right. And I only have one extra bedroom in my house. I don't know, I should buy a bigger house, but I could take them all home with me. But anyways, I am really glad. And the other group that I'm working, is Ready for Life. I'm working with youth aging out of foster care and other homeless youth. I'm working with Pam Bress. And right now, we actually have 23 that are homeless that we're trying to find homes for.
And like Mr. Stagno brought up before, is it a sliding scale as well in this situation? You all, like the 60 people you just placed, is that a sliding scale, most in need, or how does that work?
So the Palm State University is a complex that the Housing Authority built, and that's project-based vouchers. So we actually have vouchers that stay with the unit. Okay. So each individual pays about 30% of whatever their income is towards the housing. And I think the average income was about $19,000. So the Housing Authority is paying the majority.
And is there a limited time which they're allowed to stay in that facility?
Forever.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And it's gorgeous. Oh my gosh, you should see it. It looks like a hotel, and I'm so excited. Matter of fact, when I leave here, they just got the CO today. I'm going to go and get videos of them walking into their brand new apartment, because you don't know how some of these folks have been living, some of these seniors, and it just breaks my heart, because as a senior, it shouldn't be this way. It just shouldn't. And I don't know what the answer is, and usually I come to you with an issue and a solution, and I don't really have the solution, but I'm just glad that we're talking about it, and that I'm seeing some heads nod at this meeting, which is really good. It makes me happy that we're going to continue this dialogue.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for coming in, Ms. Farmer.
All right.
Appreciate it.
No questions? Come on.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Come on, Bob. Lay it on me. Come on.
Well, this is just a general question
Okay.
for you and for all of the other providers that have either already spoken or are going to speak. Is private philanthropy over the last, say, 5 years, 10 years, is it up, down, stagnant?
So as far as the Housing Authority goes, I can't really speak to that, but Drew is here. Drew, the folks from VOA, I don't know where they are with private philanthropy, but...
I'm just curious.
It's down.
It is down? Yes. I'm not surprised. Okay.
Yeah. So...
Significantly?
Yes.
Okay.
And again, so this affects a roof over your head. Like if you're a single mom and kids, how can you have a good home for them if you don't have a roof over your head? And if you're a senior, oh my gosh, and I don't know, it's just, we've really got to keep talking about it and figure out the solution.
Sure.
Okay, got pinky swear? Pinky swear?
Mr. Newman? Yes.
I want to piggyback off of his question because I'm a former director of development. Are there any funding sources currently at the county or state level that you guys are currently tapping into, whether with yourself or the other groups that you know of?
Drew, do you want to talk about that? Yeah, there's Florida Housing Finance Corporation, which they do the tax credits, and they had this, yeah.
Okay, so it's just tax, because I was looking at like Melbourne, for example, on the city level, they only have tax credits. Are there any, though, are they giving funding sources like grants as well? Or is that not so much an option for you guys when you're trying to build or try to find affordable housing in that respect?
I know a lot of times what we're doing is we work with the city of Palm Bay to identify property that they own, that they then give to us, then we can use as leverage with Florida Housing Finance.
Okay.
And there are other grant sources, but what it really takes is the community coming together and saying that this is a priority to us. And I don't think that comes from, the Florida Housing Finance Corporation or anyone outside of Brevard. That takes Brevard coming together and saying, let's do this, let's fix this problem.
Oh, for sure. No, and I agree. Like, again, I've written lots of grants, and I'm trying to make sure that on the county level, do we have anything that's currently doing that we could also enhance while we're talking about this, or is there anything else going on? I'm just trying to see what level of support you guys are currently getting from a county level, and then what this can add to that.
I don't, yeah, she's saying,
yeah.
but anyways,
Yeah.
I didn't say that out loud, but.
Mr. Jenkins?
Not where it needs to be, in my opinion, sorry.
Got it.
This problem really varies from county to county, and it's, Brevard is really feeling it now, I think, because the value of our existing real estate has just gone up so much that it's even more difficult in Brevard than perhaps in some rural areas of Florida. But my question is there a countywide coalition that's looking at this whole housing issue, affordable housing? Because there's all kinds of options that are out there, and a wide list of possibilities. I just wonder, anybody looking at it?
Ian Golden is the Director of Housing and Human Services. He can answer it better than I can, but there are different committees out there like Together in Partnership. There's an Affordable Housing Council. There's a few like that.
Are they putting together strategies?
Yeah, but the strategies are really be more tied to whatever funds they can control or whatever they can get.
Luker.
Tom, just to add to that, one thing, because I know Mayor Alfrey in Melbourne has been working with Palm Bay and another charity to kind of tackle this too. So I know there's some collaborative efforts that are starting to emerge, but I think we're all on the right track in the sense that those have to expand.
Yeah.
But it is happening on a lower level.
We've always talked about, it'd be nice to have a summit of some kind,
There are also the Homeless Coalition, which is made up of all the different groups that work together at that point. And there are also state and federal grants available for some of this. I think the biggest problem right now that we see is basically workforce, like firefighters, law enforcement, plumbers, teachers. And that seems to be the biggest problem right at the moment. And I don't mean anything against this, but I don't know that this is the way to deal with that. I think there are ways to deal with it maybe, but anyway, I'll save that for the next time, so.
We have one more appearance card. We have from Robert Burns.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be brief. I was just thinking out loud, well, I'm thinking out loud now, about this issue. I hear two things. I want to tackle the root cause of the affordable housing problem, but the issue I think that I'm hearing about this proposal specifically is the funding source. And I think there's a way to address both. One of the root causes that we have an affordable housing problem, affordable means the price is too high. It's not affordable because the price is too high. That's driven by a lack of inventory. The inventory is being bought up by a lot of these single-family homes by outside corporations and investors buying large, there's some subdivisions in Brevard County where you can't even buy the house, they're only for lease. And those are not bought by residents of Brevard County specifically, but by outside corporations. Even Zillow does it themselves. A lot of those single-family homes are converted into short-term rental vehicles for agencies like Airbnb. I think that if we try to mitigate some of the inventory being bought up by these corporations and these investors, buying 10, 15 homes, decreasing the inventory, which is driving up the cost, then we will bring the affordable housing down. But we can also put a tax on those short-term rentals and require anyone with more than one Airbnb property to require them to have a county tax receipt and pay a bed tax just like the hotels do, or maybe an additional tax on top of that. That could go towards funding the proposal that's on the table. So this will help try to mitigate some of the inventory issues that we're having by limiting how much property that these large organizations can buy up from the people who actually live here, which will kind of bring down the price. And then that tax that they're kind of skating on right now that the hotels are having to pay anyway can go towards the funding towards some of the affordable housing until the correction itself happens. And then maybe we don't need this program after a while because the inventory starts to come back up. I'm just brainstorming, that's all.
Thank you. Okay, we are, we're not going to vote today, as we know. I think everyone has a lot of food for thought on this issue. Sure that we'll get around to, I'm not sure what adjustments will be made, but whatever adjustments you'd like to make on this issue. Mr. Chandler just put it through the email just like last time. I think it was very helpful what you put together today, so thank you very much for your time on that. All right, let's get back to proposal number 8 on vacancies and suspensions. It's our last item as we move back on that. I think, Mr. Burns, you have this proposal. If you want to briefly remind the commission members, we'll talk about it and see if we want to have any action on it. Welcome
Yes,
back.
and thank you for giving me some leeway with the order of the agenda here. Again, we're here. If you've ever asked your wife where she wants to eat and she says, you decide, it usually doesn't work well when you decide and then she gets upset. And that's kind of the position we've put ourselves in here. The state asked us where we wanted to eat, and we said, you decide where we want to eat. We let the governor decide who replaces our vacancies, and he's decided that we're not going to eat right now. So we're all hungry. So the purpose of this proposal is to make sure that we get to decide where and when we eat. There's a couple of things that I wanted to address. Mr. Tredis brought up the verbiage or the language about runoff, and I agree with him. I would change wherever I put the word election and then runoff, I would change to general election, or I'm sorry, primary election, then general election, if necessary, because we don't necessarily need to have a general election. Like, for example, right now, for some of these seats, we don't have a general election because there's just one party. So a general primary election and then runoff would be replaced with general election if necessary. I know that the staff was going to get back to us on the requirements that the Supervisor of Elections would need in order to have the time frame to have those elections and qualification periods and whatnot. So I'm interested to hear what they came back with that. But again, I'm amenable to whatever is necessary in order for the supervisor to be able to do her job, and as well the voters to be able to decide who gets to represent them. And if it's not within the time frame that the supervisor can accommodate a special election, then the process of appointing someone to fill that vacancy by the county commissioners. And so that's all I have.
Okay, questions? Mr. Tredis.
Do we have that information from the Supervisor of Elections, how long it will take to do an election or 2 elections?
No, sir, I'm working with them right now on that.
At this point, we only know the price, and that was $400 for a single district and $1.4 million countywide.
I have a follow-up comment. Sure. And that is, Mr. Burns, that this 120 days, if less than 120 days remain in the term, this appointment by the Board of County Commissioners, if you do like some examples, it seems like a heck of a lot of effort, but also it would end up with sort of like a stamp of approval by existing politicians for a candidate perhaps to then move on with that approval from the existing commissioners to run for office, which I'm not really in favor of. But you look at the numbers by itself, and it's like, let's say there's 60 days left in office. We go through this appointment process, which should at the very least take 21 days and probably more. You're talking about doing all of this for 39 days left. And I know that the county commission is in recess for an entire month anyway, right, in June. So I don't know. That part of your proposal to me is just, I don't like it. I'll just tell you honestly, I don't like it.
And I understand the points you're making. I think it all comes down to the time frame of where the vacancy occurs. Because right now on the county commission, you have an issue about supermajority votes. So if there's an issue coming up that's going to require a supermajority vote, well, I think for someone to be sitting in that vacancy for 30 days is going to be very valuable to the voters, because now they have enough people there to meet that supermajority burden of 4 out of 5 votes. Right now, there's just 4 people, and they don't even know if it's a supermajority or not. Would be an anonymous 4 out of 4 or 3 out of 4. So yeah, your point is well taken about going through all this hoo-ha-ha or boo-ha-ha or however you say it, to fill a vacancy for a few days. But I think that value is dependent upon what's currently on the agenda, whether it's the budget coming up or whatever the case may be. I'm not hard on any of those numbers whatsoever. I'd be fine with moving it to 1 year. I think that if 1 year, if the vacancy is, the term remaining is more than a year, then special election. And I think anything that needs to happen before that can be an appointment. There's more than enough time within a year's time frame to make that appointment. And if there's more than a year left in the term, then that's plenty of time to put together the special elections that we need to have without having to have any undue political influence.
Well, I'd agree with you there, but that's what the existing charter language is. If there's less than a year, it's a governor's appointment. It means so if that's your position, is your objection that the governor appoints? And
correct, because right now the governor's not appointing. It's up to him whether he appoints or not. So we're stuck for a year without the vacancy being filled. With this proposal, now we can say we shall fill the vacancy, and it shall be filled within this time frame of the vacancy occurring. Yeah. Right now, it's just whatever the governor decides.
Well, I'll just point out that I don't disagree with the governor not appointing because the vacancy was April 1st for District 2, mm-hmm. and that vacancy, as it turns out, is going to be filled, I think, August 23rd. So, that's not very long. April, May, June, July, that's not even 5 months under these circumstances. So to go through all of this at all of this expense when under this example of the term that's vacant now would be filled by the current process in less than 5 months, it seems to me just like a very expensive way to go about it. And I think also in defense of the governor, I think that, he didn't appoint because this is an election year. And I think he probably didn't want to give someone favoritism with his appointment, and I don't disagree with that under these circumstances. I think if this, so I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
And that point is taken. The reason I brought this forward is because we had this occur in the city of Palm Bay, and there were over 200 people that showed up demanding that the people's voice be heard. So by pushing this off to the governor, you're basically disenfranchising the voice of the people. They have no say whatsoever about who is their representative now. It's up to one person. And it's up to that person whether he decides to put them there or not. I haven't heard that he's going to appoint somebody August 23rd. I had a conversation with the county commissioner yesterday, and they weren't aware of that.
No, we're going to be election August 23rd. And that's how it's going to be filled.
Well, that's primary.
But it's going to be settled in the primary because there's not going to go beyond that.
Well, there's a nonpartisan candidate as well, so that'll be till November. So it's going to stay vacant until November. I thought you meant that there was someone being appointed.
Yeah, I mean, even though let's say that it was settled the primary this time, that doesn't address future occurrences. So I actually had a question for Mr. Tredis. So I agree with the concept, absolutely. I like your logic. is there a timeline that does work for you, like what, at all? And I'm asking from your legal, just your logistical.
I think so much depends on what the supervisor of elections says, how long it takes to do elections, because if it takes three months per election, then you're talking 6 months minimum. And then to, have all this expense for less than 6 months to finish a term, when there's going to be, I guess, also another regular election in addition to this special election. It's just like election after election after election. So to me, it's just really important, like how long does it take for the supervisor of elections to do an election?
I hear you, and all those things were argued in Palm Bay, and I can tell you that over 95% of the people came and spoke were for, no matter what the cost, no matter what the time, they want to vote. And so that was the purpose of me bringing the special election within whatever reasonable time frame. Now, I'm okay with going to a year. We know that the supervisor can do it within a year because that's what the current language says. I was just trying to give the people as much voice as possible. Now, we can walk that back to what it currently says, but in that case, if we put it back to a year, my other point is to make it that the appointment process be brought back to the county, so at least the people here can apply. If Dave wants to run for county commission, he can apply for the appointment process and be vetted and have people come speak on his behalf. But right now, that can't happen. Right now, it's just up to the governor to decide whether he wants to appoint somebody or not, and we don't know what that person's qualifications are. And if he does appoint someone, it is an endorsement. If that person was to run for office, he was appointed by the governor. That's a pretty convincing thing, as opposed to going through an appointment process by the board where we actually have like a voting per se on them.
Can I? Sorry. Ms. Ferguson, and we'll go to.
Sorry, 2 quick points. The Palm Bay issue keeps being brought up. I think it's important to clarify that much of the outrage and voicing of opinions in Palm Bay was because they have a process and they discussed breaking the process and doing something that would have taken away a voice that had been given to the people, even though it was a day, like it's a silly situation, but a lot of that argument there is due to that. And the second one is, for me, I disagree with the principle that the voice of the people is taken away in an appointment, because it is still an appointment made by somebody that the people elect. Sure, it's a step away from them, but it's not a complete, removal of the voice of the people to me.
And I can appreciate that, but I think when we look at something as at the government level of a county all the way up to the governor, that's a big difference in the voice of the people. So yes, the majority of Brevard County did vote for our governor, so that would be the case. But what happens when the majority of Brevard County didn't vote for that governor? If it was another person and only 30% of the people in Brevard County voted for him and he's appointing, now you're, by that same logic, and I understand what you're saying, only 30% of the people are being represented. The minority is being represented by that person that they elected to make that appointment. I just think it's a cleaner way to do it at the lowest level.
Ms. Jenkins?
Do you know the percentage of the voter turnout for that special election?
For the special election in Palm Bay, it was it 13%? 13%?
13 or 19, yeah.
Yeah.
Other questions? Ms. Luker?
It's really more of a comment. I think until we get the numbers back from staff on this and can really see how this timeline would play out, we can kind of what if this to death right now. So maybe can we just kind of consider, wait until staff gives us a number from the supervisor, and then we'll know where we're at.
And I know the supervisor's slammed right now with redistricting and all the other things that she's going on, so I don't know what her time frame of getting back to us is. That's why I said if it becomes an issue of conflict of our timing, I'm fine with going to how it currently is and just adjusting how that appointment is made. But if we think that the supervisor will get back to us relatively shortly, I'm okay with that as well.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I do think that, you brought up a lot of good points. And I think one of them that this board should really take to heart is right now a board is directing by the word shall what the governor will and won't do. And I don't think we have that authority to force the governor to do anything. So we may want to consider replacing shall with may at a minimum. But as it stands now, we've got something in there that has no effect, as we've seen through this process over the last 4 months, 3 months, whatever it's been.
And we had, so the vacancy is there, and then we appointed a liaison. His chief of staff was filling in, but now he's been elected to office, so now there's not even a liaison. So for the people of District 2, there's no office for those people to go to. They would have to call another county commissioner, and I don't know what the caseload is for other county commissioners or if their staff is tapped out, but right now there's nothing for them, which is just not right.
I thought they had lots of chairs.
Well, yeah, lots of chairs. I was trying to not, but.
Try not to mention that.
All right, so we'll take this up next time again with more information from the Supervisor of Elections, and we'll add it to our agenda item for next time, along with affordable housing and other things. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
All right, I believe we reached the conclusion of our agenda for today. Is there any unfinished business?
Mr. Chair, if I may, just for staff for the next agenda, I'd like to pull my item.
I think that was number 18, was it? Yeah. Any objection to removing that item on recall? Seeing no objection, show that approved. And we have the ballot language we're going to take up next time as well on proposal number 5 and others, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And I don't think we have anything else. There's no other cards that have been turned in. And with that, Mr. Nye moves you rise.
No,
Sorry,
thank you.
briefly-
Mr. Chair,
yeah,
I'm sorry for interrupting. I didn't want to interrupt the discussion. There are still staff at the District 2 office. You have the chief of staff there and an assistant there. So it was mentioned earlier, there was no staff in the office. There is staff in the commission office.
Okay, perfect.
Just want to
Thanks.
make everyone aware
No,
of that.
thanks for that
Thank
reminder.
you for the indulgence.
And with that, we rise.
The opinions expressed by any member of the public during any period of public comment do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, Space Coast Government Television, or the program sponsor, and are solely those of the presenter. The Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, Space Coast Government Television, and the program sponsor hereby expressly disclaim any and all responsibility or liability for any defamatory or slanderous statements expressed by any member of the public during any such period.